Hello, it's Carolyn again. I'd like to continue my remarks about initiation and rite of passage. You know, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the famous psychologist Carl Jung was fascinated by rites of passage and traveled to various indigenous cultures around the world to learn more about them. He concluded that while many present-day cultures do not have formal rites of passage, we still experience symbolic rites of passage or initiations on a regular basis. When we encounter a painful life experience, such as a divorce, losing a job, being diagnosed with a terminal illness, a car accident, the death of a friend or a loved one, or a life-altering financial crisis, we find ourselves in the midst of an initiation. Initiations take countless forms in modern life, and I believe they always have something to teach us. So whether a ritualized tribal initiation or in a modern day form of suffering or loss, we must ask the question, what is the purpose of the rite of passage? This is the most important question we can ask about it. In a formal tribal rite of passage, a young person is confronted with this question frequently, perhaps on a daily basis in one way or other. In fact, the ordeal itself is a nonverbal way of asking the question. The first decision the young person has to make is not, will I have an initiation, but who and how do I want to be as I experience the challenges which involve psychological, if not physical suffering? Who do I want to be? This ordeal is meant to change us, strengthen us, teach us that at the very deepest level of our being, we are not just an ego. It means to introduce us to a part of ourselves that we've never met, because without the challenges, we couldn't meet that part, and we wouldn't. Throughout ancient and mystical traditions, this inner core of us is called by many names: the sacred self, the divine within, the greater self, or just the self with a capital S. It's different from our human ego, which we need in order to function from day to day. We develop the ego as we mature from infancy to adulthood. It's the decision-making, discerning part of us that processes information, makes choices, drives a car, develops our careers, and parents our children. The ego is an enormous aspect of who we are, but it's not all of who we are. At the core of the initiatory challenge is a tempering or even shattering of the ego. In modern cultures, our sense of progress, technological achievement, and our belief in infinite growth have allowed the human ego to become pathologically in control of our human experience. When any organ in the body becomes enlarged beyond its normal size, we consider that an unhealthy condition that requires monitoring. Yet, without noticing, the human ego has become pathologically enlarged to the extent that it's a danger to itself and the planet. It's become dangerous because when the ego dominates and minimizes or eclipses the sacred self, we become estranged from our values and what matters most to us. Our priorities become skewed, and we declare war on the earth and the very qualities of life that promote our well-being. In keeping with mystical and indigenous tradition, Carl Jung argued that when the ego diminishes or ignores the sacred self, at some point, a greater wisdom within us or in the world finds a way to topple its empire. Formal rites of passage were designed to do just that. Their intention was to help the ego find its rightful place in relation to the sacred self, so that who the human believes they are gives way to who they genuinely, authentically are. If we don't consciously monitor the relationship between the ego and the self by witnessing the ego's attempts to dominate our lives and instead opting to serve the self, we will succumb to delusions of endless growth, greed, exploitation, human superiority, racial superiority, and securing our well-being at the expense of other living beings. The mystics, poets, artists, and luminaries of wisdom throughout human history have portrayed this struggle in their expressions throughout human history, through art, through music, through poetry. One example is the following poem by Juan Ramon Jimenez. It's entitled, "I Am Not I." I am not I. I am this one walking beside me, whom I do not see, whom at times I manage to visit and whom at other times I forget, who remains calm and silent while I talk and forgives gently when I hate, who walks where I am not, who will remain standing when I die. In this simple expression, Jimenez depicts the ego and the self living side by side. It's as if he's saying that I'm not really the one that you see. I'm actually another one who walks beside me, who sometimes even I don't see. Sometimes I manage to connect with that self, capital S, self, and at other times I forget that it even exists. It remains calm and silent and forgives and walks where my ego doesn't. That I will remain standing when I, my ego identity, dies. The mystical poet Rumi wrote, "There is a life force within your soul. Seek that. There is a gem in the mountain of your body. Seek that mine. Oh, traveler, if you are in search of that, don't look outside. Look inside yourself and see that." The Indian Vedas declare, "I am that, thou art that, all this is that." And in the Christian tradition, Jesus taught, "The kingdom of God is within you." The initiatory ordeal is designed to compel the person being initiated to encounter the sacred self through hardship, adversity, distress, and uncertainty. Through the ordeal, he or she discovers resources within the sacred self that sustain and guide them through the ordeal. As the ordeal subsides, the initiate comes down from the mountain, or perhaps they feel as if they're climbing out of a deep well of suffering, and they spend a significant amount of time processing the initiation experience. The rite of passage is not complete, however, until the person undergoing it has made sense of the initiatory journey, gleaning from the experience the lessons that they've learned, the emotions that they've encountered, and what new perceptions they've discovered. So what does the rite of passage have to do with the elder, since it happens to a young person around the age of puberty? In the web of life, in an indigenous culture, everyone is related to everyone else, either by blood or by role. So the elder is deeply involved in rites of passage. First, older women help initiate young women, and older men help initiate young men. So there's that involvement. Remember that the elders have been preparing the youth for their initiation almost from birth. And as the young person is going through their ordeal, the elders are there to guide them. Most of the time, the young person is slightly separated from the elders, but the elders are not far away. And if called on, they can support the young person in their ordeal. Part of the elder's function is to notice, even from birth, the gifts that the young person has brought into the world. The community believes that those gifts are meant to serve everyone in the community. And so the elders are very alert to the gifts that a young person has. During the initiation ceremony, the elders usually have a conversation with the initiate about their gifts and also about death. Often the young person is convinced that the ordeal will kill them, and this presents a perfect opportunity to discuss death. After the rite of passage ceremony is over, the young person begins to understand what role he or she is suited for in the community based on his or her gifts and the interactions that they've had with elders during the initiation. The elder then supports the initiated young person in stepping into their role as they mature. So whether the elder serves the community by taking part in the rite of passage ceremony to support the youth, or whether they have other ceremonial roles, or whether they serve as teachers or shamans or healers, or have some other role, the elder in an indigenous community is never really retired. Their physical labor may have decreased, but they still serve strategic purposes in the village, and the key word here is serve. All members of the indigenous community serve, but the elder's role is crucial. They know that without initiating the youth, the young person will become a danger to the community, and the community, as a result, will ultimately fail. An African proverb says that a child who's not embraced by the village will burn it down just to feel the heat. The word embraced includes initiating the youth for the sake of everyone in the community. So the final question for us as elders is, how are we serving the community? We may not be participating in the initiation of youth, but we have endless opportunities to serve. Although our physical strength wanes and we may not have the energy or stamina we once had, even though we face limitations and personal ordeals of our own daily initiations that we never thought we'd have to encounter, we need not become stagnant or deemed as useless by our community. Our withering planet and our broken world are pleading for us to step into and claim the role of elder, even if we have no idea right now what that means.